In votes already cast across the country, the race could not be tighter or the stakes higher, as Vice President Harris reminded voters earlier today.
Look, just imagine the Oval Office on January 20th. It's going to be one or two people. It's going to be either Donald Trump or me. If it's Donald Trump, you can see what that day is going to be. It will be him sitting at that desk, stewing over his enemies list. He is full of grievance. He is full of dark language that is about retribution and revenge. And so the American people have a choice. It's either going to be that or it'll be me there, focused on my to-do list.
At Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden, where Dr. Phil is still speaking, 25 people were scheduled to speak before Donald Trump, including, as we mentioned, his disgraced and disbarred former attorney, Rudy Giuliani, who praised his former boss while mocking Harris.
Some people get a little annoyed at him. He speaks his mind. But wouldn't you rather have a president that communicates with you than one who sits in a basement babbling? Or another one who, when asked, why do you want to be president, she says, my mother was from the middle class.
Joining me now from Madison Square Garden is NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, thank you very much for coming back to this Sunday show. What's the mood like there, and what can we expect to hear from Trump when he finally takes the stage?
We're expecting Trump to take the stage here in just a little bit, but I think the Rudy Giuliani bite is an example. And actually right now, over my shoulder is Dr. Phil McGraw is speaking right now. And Dr. Phil right now, just to give you an idea of sort of the last vibe from the hours, he is justifying the name calling of Donald Trump. And he is suggesting that Donald Trump is not, in fact, a bully. A bully only exists when there is an imbalance of power, and that Kamala Harris has just as loud of a microphone as Donald Trump does. Donald Trump is just better at it, and instead he is suggesting that the cancel culture, in Dr. Phil's words, are what is putting American business and putting the American society at risk. This is, when you're looking at this Madison Square Garden event, Jonathan, you're looking at a cast of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., you're looking at Rudy Giuliani, Alina Habba, you're looking at Stephen Miller, and this has been a 20,000-person filled arena here that has been enthusiastic, as much as you really see for any New York Knicks game inside of this arena here. We are waiting for Elon Musk to take the stage. We just heard from Tucker Carlson. And I think it's important to note a lot of the folks that you see taking the stage at this event, and contrast that with folks who, even 4 years ago were taking the stage for Donald Trump, the likes of Mike Pence. Right? It's the likes of John Kelly. Those individuals have been cast aside by Donald Trump. They have even spoken out against him. And in its place, you have seen a new sort of bastion of MAGA faithful, including the likes of a Dr. Phil and an Elon Musk. And there have been moments here where Hillary Clinton was referred to by one speaker as a son of a bleep. Kamala Harris has been referred to as the devil. There's a certain level of cruelty that has been directed and denigration towards some individuals, particularly the Vice President Kamala Harris. And for the talk about inflation and the economy and immigration, there has been a heavy dose of vulgarity and attacks, name-calling on the opponents of this Republican Party here today. Of course, we're 9 days out, and Donald Trump lost by 23 percentage points in 2020 to Joe Biden here in the state of New York. But he and his campaign believe that the bright lights here make this very much of a national campaign. And really, this is a defining event for the MAGA movement. After 9.5 years of campaign rally, this is Donald Trump's first inside of an arena like this, and with quite a cast of opening acts who have really echoed what has become mainstream Republicanism here in the year of 2024, Jonathan.
NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard coming to us live from inside Madison Square Garden. Thank you very much for coming back to the Sunday show. Donald Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden comes days after his own former chief of staff went on record to describe his former boss as a fascist. But that jamboree happening right now, you see it there on your screen, in that place is particularly chilling because in 1939, more than 20,000 supporters of a different fascist leader, Adolf Hitler, packed the Garden for a so-called pro-America rally. A rally where speakers voiced anti-Semitic rhetoric from a stage draped with Nazi banners. When a Jewish protester rushed the stage, the Associated Press reported, quote, instantly, a dozen or more stormtroopers set upon him, knocking him down and beating him as he held his head in his arms. Most of his clothing was torn from his body. Later, he was booked for disorderly conduct. Now, against that backdrop of history, Donald Trump, the man who has threatened to use the military against opponents he calls enemies from within, who has threatened to use the troops to quell what he says are lawless cities, and to use those troops to carry out mass deportations of immigrants, is once again turning Madison Square Garden into a staging ground for extremism. Joining me now, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, history professor at New York University and author of Strong Men, Mussolini to the Present. And Anne Applebaum, Pulitzer Prize-winning historian, staff writer at The Atlantic, and author of Autocracy, Inc., The Dictators Who Want to Run the World. I cannot wait to have this conversation with both of you. And Ruth, thank you both very much for being here. Ruth, since you are not at the table, let me start with you and just talk to us about the parallels that we're seeing between 1939, that rally at Madison Square Garden, and the rally we're seeing right now at Madison Square Garden, and the rhetoric that's already coming out of this rally.
Yeah, of course, this is not a casual choice to have it there. And although Donald Trump objects strenuously to people comparing him to Hitler, he is the one who has gone out of his way to use Nazi rhetoric, talking about polluting our blood, calling people vermin, even releasing a campaign ad that says he's going to create a unified Reich in America. And of course, as General Kelly said, complaining that, generals should be obeying him like Hitler's generals obeyed the Fuhrer. So this is not at all casual. I want to make a comment about what Von Hilliard was talking about. Trump has been using his rallies since 2015 to radicalize people, to incite violence, to kind of loosen people's inhibitions against violence. And all of the racist stereotypes against Latinos and blacks and misogynist stereotypes and all of the vulgarity and the crudeness is designed to help people lose their inhibitions and their taboos against inciting, against committing violence if the leader asks them to.
And, Anne, you write exactly this point. In your latest piece in The Atlantic, why does Trump sound like Hitler, Stalin, and Mussolini? And you walk us through what Mussolini used to say, what Stalin used to say, what Hitler used to say, and then you bring up things that Donald Trump has said, including they're poisoning the blood of our country, they're destroying the blood of our country, bad genes, they're not humans, they're animals, cold-blooded killers, the enemy from within, sick, radical left lunatics. And you say he knows exactly what he's doing when he does this.
So a couple of points to make about it. One is this isn't language that's been part of mainstream American politics before. When I was writing that article, I went back and looked at a few other eras in the last century to see if I could find anybody talking about vermin or poisoning the blood or comparing political enemies to insects. And I couldn't find it. Even George Wallace's horrific racist speech that he made in 1963, where he's segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever, he doesn't use that kind of language. This is language that is deliberately being imported and used knowingly by Trump and by others around him, including at this rally. It's also interesting that normally at this point in a campaign, a candidate would be going to the center. He would be looking for, swing voters, for, people in the middle, people who are trying to make up their minds. But it looks to me, and this echoes a little bit what Ruth just said, that what Trump is trying to do is radicalize people who don't usually vote to reach some kind of, latent, angry, maybe racist, maybe violent segment of society that doesn't usually turn out for elections. And that would just be my guess as to what he's doing, because this, and particularly this rally, is using a kind of extremism that we're not used to certainly in the last 2 weeks of U.S. presidential campaign.
Ruth, to Ann's point, he's using this rhetoric to get these folks, to get them out to vote. I just wonder, is he also doing this to get them to go the next step? And that is to incite violence, to have them do violence if he doesn't win.
Yeah, I believe so. He does need them to vote, but as we well know from all the GOP senators and congressmen who refused to commit to accepting the results of a free and fair election, the GOP is now an autocratic party for the most part that is dependent on election denial, the big lie that they still won't refute Trump, idea that he won the 2020 election.
Ruth, let me stop you there for 1 second, because just taking the stage right now is someone who fosters that notion that Donald Trump didn't lose the 2020 election. His vice presidential running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, who is now taking the podium. Not sure we're going to take this, but Ruth, finish your response.
Yeah, now I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry, Ruth.
That's okay.
Get your train of thought back, and I'm gonna come to Ann. Ann, if you want to pick up on what Ruth was talking about. In fact, let me read something you wrote also in this Atlantic piece that actually mentions Ruth. There was a rally that Trump did where he stood in front of a huge slogan, "Trump was right about everything." And you write, this is language borrowed directly from Benito Mussolini, the Italian fascist. Soon after the rally, the scholar Ruth Ben-Ghiat posted a photograph of a building in Mussolini's Italy displaying his slogan, "Mussolini is always right."
So this indicates to me that people around Trump are deliberately echoing this language, that this is part of their game, that for whatever reasons, whether it's to get out the vote or whether it's to prepare people to commit acts of violence after they lose the election, I don't know, but they do know what they're doing. They're not making accidental allusions to the 1930s. You don't do that by accident or by mistake.
Right. And Ruth, I'm just wondering, to Ann's point, I mean, we've never seen this before in American politics. We've never heard this language from the top levels of American politics. I'm just wondering, can we as a nation pull back from the brink that we're hanging off of?
We can certainly hope so, that this exacerbation of extremism will wake people up, those who still think it can't happen here, and get them to see the GOP and Donald Trump as in an authoritarian frame, whatever that means to them, because this is a party that has exited democracy. It no longer believes in the norms and practices and values of democracy, which is why January 6th happened and why the GOP passed a resolution in 2022 that said that January 6th was, quote, legitimate political discourse. Mm-hmm. They now think that violence is a legitimate way to solve political problems. And that's what